The nurse grabbed my wrist so hard her nails pressed into my skin. "Mrs. Bennett, look at me. Your husband is bleeding internally. The surgeon is scrubbing in now, but I need you to sign these forms, and if you have a copy of his ID or insurance, get it fast." I should have stayed there. I should have signed whatever they put in front of me and prayed. Instead, I drove home like a mad woman with my whole body shaking because Eli always kept everything in order. Insurance cards in the kitchen drawer, emergency cash in the coffee tin. Copies of our documents in a fireproof box on the top shelf of the hall closet. He liked plans. He liked backups. He liked control. I dragged a chair across the floor, climbed up, pulled down the metal box, and nearly dropped it when I saw the lock was already open. Inside was our marriage certificate, our mortgage papers, his birth certificate, and a passport I had never seen before. Same face, same scar by his eyebrow, same dark eyes, different name. Gabriel Hart. I just stood there with it in my hand, hearing my own breathing like somebody else was doing it for me. My husband had never mentioned another name. Not once. Not in 5 years of marriage. Not through late-night confessions, not through sickness, not through the worst months of our life. Then I opened the passport. The stamps were real. Lisbon, Buenos Aires, Toronto. Dates that didn't fit the life he had told me. Dates from years when he had sworn he was working construction in Ohio, saving money, dreaming about opening his own business one day. Folded into the back sleeve was a tiny silver key and a receipt for a bus station locker downtown. And that was the moment the floor of my life started to split open. But that wasn't the part that made me sick. When I got back to the hospital, the nurse at the desk asked, "Are you family of Gabriel Hart?" I stopped so hard the strap of my purse slid off my shoulder. "No," I said too quickly. "My husband is Eli Bennett." She frowned at the screen. "A woman called 10 minutes ago asking if a Gabriel Hart had been admitted after a crash on Route 9. A woman. I went cold all over. Ali was in recovery when they finally let me see him. One side of his face was bruised purple. There was dried blood in his hair. Tubes ran out of both arms. The machine above him kept making quiet sounds that felt far too calm for the kind of fear eating through me. His eyes opened when I stepped closer. He looked at me, then at the passport in my hand, and every bit of color drained out of his face. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. "Told them not to let you go home alone," he whispered, voice raw. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear hit the passport cover. "Who is Gabriel Hart?" He looked toward the door before he looked back at me. "Mara, listen to me very carefully. Put that away." I actually laughed. It came out ugly and broken. "Put it away? You need to leave the hospital. Right now." I stared at him like I didn't know him, because suddenly I didn't. "Don't ask anyone about that name," he said. "And don't tell anyone you found it." The machine above him started beeping faster. And for the first time since I met him, my husband looked terrified of me. I wish I could tell you I handled it with dignity. I didn't. My whole life had been built on a promise I made to myself when I was 13 and waiting on the porch for a father who never came back. I would never again love a man who made me feel stupid. I would never again be the last person to know the truth. Eli knew that story. He knew it because I told him on the second date, when we sat in my car outside the diner and I said, "If you lie to me, even once, I'm gone." He reached over, touched my hand, and said, "Then I'll never lie to you." That memory hit me so hard in that hospital room, I thought I might actually choke on it. He had been the safe one. Bat was the cruel joke, the gentle one. The man who sat beside my mother's hospital bed and read to her when the chemo made her too tired to hold a book. The man who held me when I lost our baby at 10 weeks and said over and over, "You are not failing. Your body is not failing. This is not your fault." He had built me back together with hands that, apparently, belonged to somebody else. And recently, if I was honest, the cracks had already started. He had been checking the locks 3 times every night, taking calls outside, turning his phone face down, He kept asking if I could take a few weeks off work, if maybe we should go somewhere, maybe rent a place under another name, just for a little while. I thought it was anxiety. I thought the car accident had started the panic. I had no idea the panic had been living in my house long before the crash. And then something happened that made the passport feel even heavier. When I stepped into the vending area to get coffee, a woman in a gray coat stood up from the corner table and said my name. Not Mrs. Bennett, Mara Reed. I froze. She was maybe in her 40s, no makeup, hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing. She looked like a woman who had spent a long time learning not to be noticed. "You need to stop saying your husband's name out loud," she said quietly. I tightened my grip on the coffee cup. "Who are you?" Her gaze dropped to the passport sticking out of my bag. "So you found it. Are you the one who called the hospital asking for Gabriel?" She didn't answer. If he still had that passport, then he was preparing for something worse than I thought. "Who are you?" I asked again, louder. She slid a business card across the table. There was only a first name on it. Nina. No company. No title. Just a number written in pen on the back. Then she leaned in and said, "Don't trust anyone who suddenly wants to help you. Not hospital staff, not local police, not even people you've known a long time." I felt anger rise through my fear. "You think you can walk up to me, say something insane and disappear?" "Yes," she said. "Because if I'm right, you don't have much time." Then she walked away before I could stop her. I didn't know it then, but that woman had just kicked open the next door in my nightmare. When I went back into Eli's room, he was trying to sit up despite the pain. "You were gone too long." I stood at the foot of the bed and crossed my arms so he wouldn't see them shaking. "A woman named Nina talked to me." His eyes shut. That one reaction told me more than any explanation would have. "So you do know her. Mara, listen to me." His voice turned urgent, sharp. "Go home. Take only what matters. A few clothes, cash if you have it, leave your phone." My mouth fell open. "You still think I'm just going to do what you say?" "Yes," he snapped, then swallowed against the pain. Softer, he said, "Please, just this once." "No. Not until you tell me who you really are." He stared at me so long I thought maybe he would finally say it. Instead he whispered, "If you love me at all, don't ask that here." That was when something inside me began to harden. I left the hospital furious, confused, humiliated, and stupidly still worried about him. Outside, the parking lot lights made everything look too bright and too empty. I kept hearing Nina's warning in my head. "Don't trust anyone who suddenly wants to help you." So when my best friend Rachel texted, "Saw your missed calls. I'm coming over," I almost told her no. Almost. Rachel had been my person since college. She knew about my miscarriage, my mother's death, every stupid fight Eli and I ever had about money or paint colors or whether our broken dishwasher counted as an emergency. If there was one person in the world I didn't think I needed to doubt, it was her. But by the time I pulled into my driveway, every light in the house was on. I had turned them off before I left. The front door was closed, but not all the way, just enough for the night air to push it open with a low creak when I touched it. I didn't scream, I didn't call out, I just backed away, got in the car again, and locked the doors. Then I looked down at the silver key from the passport. For one wild second, I thought maybe the break-in had been about money, jewelry, random bad luck. But deep down, I already knew. Whoever had been inside my house hadn't come for a television. They had come for the life hidden behind that other name. And that's when I made the worst and best decision of the night. Instead of calling Rachel, I drove downtown to the old bus station with my heart pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. The lockers were in a half-lit hallway that smelled like wet concrete and cheap bleach. Most of them were empty. A homeless man slept on a bench near the payphones, hat over his eyes, like the whole world had nothing to do with him. The silver key slid into locker 204, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside was a black duffel bag. There was cash. A burner phone. A loaded handgun I did not touch. 3 passports rubber banded together. 2 blank. One with Eli's face under the name Gabriel Hart. A newspaper clipping. And a sealed envelope with my name on it. Mara. My knees nearly gave out. The handwriting wasn't Eli's, it was my mother's. What I saw next changed everything. I ripped the envelope open with numb fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. If Gabriel Hart ever comes to you, read this before you decide whether to run. That was all. No explanation. No signature. Just that sentence and the looping blue ink handwriting I hadn't seen since before cancer took her. I stood there in the bus station hallway, gripping the note so hard it crumbled. My mother had been dead for 2 years. She had never once mentioned a Gabriel Hart. Never once hinted that some man with another identity might someday crash into my life. Except he already had. He had married me. Under the note was a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Key Wittiesitz vanishes before testimony in crossfire case." Beneath it was a grainy photo of Eli, younger and thinner, looking over his shoulder as cameras flashed. Not Eli. Gabriel. The article said he had been the only surviving witness who could tie real estate developer Adrian Cross to a fatal apartment fire that killed 11 people, including a city housing inspector and his wife. The witness disappeared before trial. Cross walked free. I read the piece twice, then a third time because my brain refused to accept that the man who made me tea every morning had once been plastered across front pages in a case like that. Then the burner phone in the bag started ringing. I nearly dropped it. There was no number on the screen, just you and Nuninor. I stared at it until the ringing stopped. A second later, it rang again. I answered before fear could stop me. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice, low and calm. You should not have opened the locker. My mouth went dry. Who is this? Bring the passport and the note to your husband's hospital room. Alone. If you involve anyone else, he dies before sunrise. The line went dead. I sat there still holding the phone to my ear while something cold slid through my body. I didn't know who the man was. I didn't know if the threat was real. But I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Whatever life Eli had lived before me was not buried. It was still hungry. I called Nina from the number on the card because I had run out of people I could pretend were normal. She answered on the first ring. I found a locker, I said, and a note from my mother. There was a pause. Where are you? Bus station downtown. Stay where people can see you. I'm 5 minutes away. You knew about the note? Another pause. No. But I know who your husband is. When she arrived, she didn't waste time pretending. She took one look at the clipping in my hand and said, he should have burned all of this. I laughed bitterly. So there really is a he. Good to know. She studied me with something that almost looked like pity. Your husband's real name is Gabriel Hart. 12 years ago, he agreed to testify against Adrian Cross after a fire in one of Cross's condemned apartment buildings killed Gabriel's sister and nephew. I blinked. The article said the inspector and his wife died. They did. Gabriel's sister rented on the 3rd floor. It wasn't the first building Cross neglected, and it wouldn't have been the last. Gabriel worked security for one of Cross's companies. He saw payments, threats, orders, enough to connect the fire to more than greed. I could barely keep up. So why disappear? Because witnesses in that case started dying. The hallway around us seemed to pull away. Nina kept talking. Gabriel agreed to cooperate. He was moved before trial. New identity, new state, new life. Eli Bennett. And you are? I used to help manage protected witnesses. Used to, past tense. My eyes narrowed. Why aren't you doing that now? Her jaw tightened. Because somebody inside the system was selling locations. Gabriel stopped trusting the people assigned to keep him alive. Smart man. I looked down at the passports in the bag. So all of this is real? Yes. Then why didn't he tell me? Nina's face didn't change. Because he loved being Eli Bennett more than he feared losing Gabriel Hart. That answer should have comforted me. It didn't. Because love doesn't feel like a locked box and a loaded gun. But that still wasn't the worst part. I told Nina about the man on the phone, the threat, the demand to return to the hospital. She went still in a way that made me understand danger before she even spoke. Then they already know you found the locker. Who is they? Cross's people. Or whoever's working for him now. Adrian Cross is still doing this? Over one witness from 12 years ago? Not over a witness. Nina looked at me carefully. Over what Gabriel might still have. I frowned. What is that supposed to mean? She hesitated. There was evidence missing when Gabriel disappeared. Original recordings, financial ledgers. Something strong enough to reopen the case. And you think he kept it? I think Cross thinks he did. I gave a shaky laugh. Wonderful. My husband is either a liar, a ghost, or a human filing cabinet. Nina didn't smile. Mara, listen to me. If Cross's people searched your house, this is moving faster than I expected. We need to get ahead of it. By doing what? By finding Gabriel before they do? The problem was, Gabriel was still in that hospital bed, bleeding and terrified and refusing to tell me the truth. At least, that's what I thought. When we got back to the hospital, his room was empty. Not sleeping, empty. Gone, empty. Monitors disconnected. IV line removed. Sheet stripped. The nurse at the station said he had been transferred for imaging 20 minutes earlier. Radiology said they never got him, and suddenly every hallway looked like a trap. I could feel my pulse in my gums. He was injured, he could barely sit up. Then he had help, Nina said. I turned to her. From you? No, I wanted to believe that. I really did. Then Rachel came running toward me from the elevators with tears in her eyes and threw her arms around me so fast I had no time to stop her. Oh my God, she said. I came as soon as I heard. Are you okay? Where's Eli? My whole body locked. Because I had not told Rachel which hospital. And I had definitely not told her Eli was missing. I pulled back slowly. How did you know where to find me? For 1 second, just one, something flickered across her face. Then it was gone. I called around, she said. Mara, what's wrong? Nina stepped slightly closer to me. Rachel noticed. Who is this? I should have answered. I should have said friend, nurse, nobody. Instead, I heard myself say, how long have you known the name Gabriel Hart? Rachel's expression shattered. That single second of silence told me more than words ever could. I didn't know what I was feeling anymore. Rage, grief, panic, they all collided until I couldn't separate one from the other. Rachel took a step back like I had slapped her. Mara, let me explain. No, I said. No, you do not get to say that to me. Not tonight. Security turned the corner at the far end of the hall, and Rachel's eyes darted toward them, then back to me. She looked scared. Good. Then she whispered, if you stay here, they'll find you too. She turned and ran. I went after her before Nina could stop me. We chased her through the parking garage, my shoes slipping on the painted concrete, breath tearing through my chest. Rachel reached her car, fumbled her keys, and I grabbed her arm hard enough to make her cry out. Talk. She was shaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. That's not an answer. Tears spilled down her face. I thought they just wanted documents. They said no one would get hurt. Who? She pressed her lips together so tight they went white. Mina appeared beside me like she had materialized out of the dark. Rachel, she said flatly. If Adrian Cross sent you, you should start telling the truth. Rachel's face drained. I didn't know his name at first. A man from one of Cross's offices came to me months ago. He said Eli wasn't who he claimed to be. He said if I heard anything strange, any travel plans, any old names, I should pass it along. I thought maybe Eli was cheating on you. Or in debt. I thought I was helping. I stared at her, unable to process that word. Helping. I only told them when you called crying from the hospital, she rushed on. I said you sounded terrified, that something had happened, that maybe you found out whatever Eli was hiding. That's all I said. I swear. My hand fell away from her arm. Months. She had been watching us for months. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was this thin, broken question. Why? Rachel sobbed once. Because they paid my brother's rehab bills. Because they knew about the loans. Because every time I tried to pull away, they reminded me they could ruin what was left of my family. I should have felt sorry for her. I didn't. Not then. Because somewhere in that city my husband had vanished out of a guarded hospital, and the only solid thing left in my life had just admitted it was rotten too. And then Nina said something that made everything tilt again. This wasn't about random updates, she said. Cross was searching for Mara specifically. I turned. What? Nina met my eyes. Your mother worked the original case. I felt the blood leave my face. No, I whispered. My mother was a court reporter. Yes, Nina said. Assigned to Cross's hearings, she was there for off-record statements. She handled transcripts before they became public. If evidence disappeared, she could have known. I thought of the note in the locker. If Gabriel Hart ever comes to you, read this before you decide whether to run. My mother knew. My mother had known. And she had never told me. What I learned next hurt more than the passport ever could. Nina drove me to my childhood house at 2 a.m. because suddenly the dead had become part of the living problem. The place had been empty since Mom died. I hadn't sold it yet because I couldn't bear to clear out her sewing room or the little coffee stain on the kitchen ceiling she always said she'd paint over next weekend and never did. The house smelled shut up and dusty and heartbreakingly familiar. I walked through it with a flashlight, my shadow jumping over walls where old family photos still hung crooked. My whole chest tightened when I passed the hallway mirror with the chip in the corner from when I was 14 and threw a shoe at my father's closed bedroom door after he left. Mom had stayed in this house with all her secrets. Had she looked at me across the dinner table and thought about Gabriel Hart? Had she watched me fall in love with Eli and said nothing because she wanted me safe or because she believed I needed to know on my own? I hated her a little in that moment. And that hate made the grief worse. Nina searched Mom's office while I opened drawers and boxes like I was tearing through a stranger's life. Most of it was exactly what it should have been. Bills. Recipes. Sewing patterns. Christmas cards tied with ribbon, normal things. Cruel, ordinary things. Then I found a false bottom in the lowest desk drawer. Underneath was a cassette recorder, 2 microtapes in plastic sleeves, and a velvet jewelry box I had never seen before. Inside the box was a key attached to a paper tag. Safe deposit. Read Tart. My stomach dropped so fast, I had to sit down on the floor. Hart. The name from the passport. The name my mother had written like a warning from the grave. Nina slowly let out a breath. This is what Cross has been chasing. I stared at the key. My mother hid evidence with my name on it? With Gabriel's too. I looked up sharply. Why would she do that? Nina didn't answer right away. And that silence started to scare me more than anything else. Say it. I think, she said carefully, your husband met you because of this. The room went dead still. No, Mara, no. I got to my feet so fast the chair beside me tipped over. You are not going to tell me my marriage was some assignment. I'm telling you I don't know where the mission ended and the love began. That sentence broke something open inside me. Because if she had just said he used you, I could have hated him cleanly. But the possibility that both things were true, that he came to me for a reason and stayed because he loved me, was so much uglier. So much harder. That kind of betrayal doesn't kill love. It poisons it slowly. And I didn't know how to survive that. But the night still had one more knife for me. Inside the jewelry box was a folded receipt from a bookstore cafe. The date was 6 years ago. The day Eli first spoke to me. I remember that day perfectly because I dropped a stack of paperbacks, and he knelt to help me pick them up. He smiled and said, "You always recommend sad endings or just the good books?" I laughed. He bought coffee. We talked until my break ended. I told Rachel later that night I thought I had just met the kindest man alive. That receipt meant he had planned to be there. Maybe not the words, maybe not the smile, but the meeting. Our beginning. I sank onto the edge of my mother's desk and pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth. He had rehearsed the first page of my life with him, and I had called it fate. But if I thought that was the bottom, I was wrong. The safe deposit box was at a downtown bank that opened at 9. Nina wanted to wait. I refused. We sat in the parking lot until sunrise, both exhausted, both jumpy, both watching every car that slowed too long near the curb. I spent those hours replaying every year with Eli in my head like a movie somebody had edited without my permission. The first date, the proposal, the way he knew my favorite author before I told him. The way he asked about my mother's work early on, so casually I barely noticed. The way he insisted when she got sick that I move back into her house for a few weeks to help her. Was he searching even then? Had he stood in her kitchen while she was dying and wondered where she hid the evidence? Nina must have seen it on my face because she said quietly, "You're not wrong to feel used." I laughed without humor. Thanks, but people aren't always one thing. Gabriel lived under threat for a long time. Fear makes motives ugly. I turned to her. Did he marry me for that key? I don't know. Would you, if you were me, believe anything he says now? She looked out the windshield. No. At least she was honest. When the bank finally opened, the manager looked at the old tag, checked the records, and frowned. This box has been dormant for years. He disappeared into the back and returned with a long metal case. My hands were so cold I could barely fit the key into the lock. Inside was a sealed envelope, a flash drive, a copy of a property ledger, and a photo. The photo was of my mother and Gabriel. Not Eli. Not the soft-spoken husband from my kitchen. Gabriel. He looked younger, harder. Not yet worn smooth by the man I knew. My mother stood beside him with one hand on his shoulder, both of them looking straight at the camera like they expected this picture to be found one day. On the back, in my mother's writing, were 6 words. If he tells you, listen carefully. I closed my eyes. The sealed envelope was addressed to me. This time the letter was longer. Mara, if you are reading this, then one of 2 things has happened. Gabriel found the courage to trust you, or the truth arrived too late. I pray it is the first. My mother wrote that Gabriel came to her days before the original trial, terrified and furious, carrying recordings that implicated Adrian Cross not only in the fire, but in bribery, witness intimidation, and at least one arranged death. She believed he wanted to do the right thing. She also believed someone inside the system would destroy the evidence before it ever reached a courtroom, so she made a second copy and hid it, not because Gabriel asked. Because she didn't trust the state to protect an honest man against a rich one. Then came the line that hollowed me out. He met you years later because he came back for what I kept. I sat there staring at that sentence until the letters blurred. There it was, plain, clean, cruel. He met me because of the evidence, not because of my laugh, not because of the novels stacked in my arms, not because of fate. He came for a hidden key. The rest of the letter said something else though. Something I hated for making my heart ache instead of go cold. If he stayed, it was because something changed in him. I wanted to tear the page in half, because I didn't want my mother defending him from beyond the grave. I wanted someone to tell me I was a fool, and that was the end of it. Instead, I got complexity. And complexity is the cruelest thing when you are trying to heal. Then Nina plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The first file was an audio recording. Adrian Cross's voice filled the car, smooth and amused. People hear building code violations and think paperwork. They don't understand that fear is a cost of business. Another voice, shaking, asked, "And the tenants?" Cross laughed. "If they can't afford better, they don't matter enough to stop the project." I felt sick. There were more files. Payment logs, shell companies, names of officials. One audio clip where Cross told somebody to make the witness problem disappear before he starts believing he has a conscience. My hands curled into fists so tight my nails cut my palms. This could destroy him. So why had Gabriel never come back for it? Nina answered without me asking. Because once he fell in love with you, taking this would mean telling you why he entered your life. I turned on her. Do not romanticize this. I'm not. I'm explaining it. The problem was, I believed her. And belief felt like betrayal too. Then my phone, my real phone, the one Eli told me to leave behind, started vibrating in my bag. I almost ignored it, then I saw the caller ID. Eli, no, Gabriel. I answered on speaker without saying hello. His voice came low and urgent. Are you alone? No. A pause. Is Nina with you? Yes. Good. That means you already know enough to hate me. My throat tightened against my will. Where are you? Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Another pause. I heard traffic somewhere near him. Cross knows about the box. Rachel led them close enough. I got out of the hospital before they reached the floor. Why didn't you tell me the truth? His breathing changed. Because the first truth would have made you leave. The first truth was that you targeted me. Silence. That silence was my answer. I closed my eyes and let it stab all the way through. So it's true. I came back looking for evidence your mother hid, he said, each word like it hurt. I found you instead. I laughed once. It sounded like something dying. Do you hear yourself? Yes. Then say the whole thing. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. I met you on purpose. I kept seeing you on purpose. At first, yes. Because I thought if your mother trusted anyone with that evidence, it would be her daughter. Tears blurred the bank across the street. At first. The words came out as a whisper. At first, he repeated. And then I should have told you, 100 times I should have told you, on our third date, before I kissed you, before I asked you to marry me, before I held your hand at your mother's funeral. I know that. I couldn't breathe. I loved you, he said. Not the mission, not the evidence, you. I almost screamed then because that was exactly the problem. If he had never loved me, this would be simple. But if he did love me, then he had chosen to lie every single day while looking me in the eye. And that kind of love is its own violence. But even that confession wasn't the end. His voice sharpened. You need to listen to me now. Cross is hosting a foundation gala tonight at the Ormond Hotel. He's making a Senate run. If we release the files online, he'll bury them in legal noise and call them fake. We need public exposure, press, live witnesses. Everything at once. Nina leaned toward the phone. You sound like you already have a plan. I do, he said, but Mara has to choose whether she wants any part of it. Choose. That word landed differently after a night of discovering how many choices had been made for me. I wiped my face and said, if I help you, I'm not helping my husband. I'm ending the man who burned families alive and bought people like spare parts. Understand? I understand. And after this, you don't get to ask me to forgive you. Another silence. Then, quietly, I know. I should have hung up. Instead, I said, tell me where to meet you. By 6 that evening, I had slept exactly 0 minutes and aged about 10 years. Mina and I spent the day duplicating files, contacting a journalist she trusted, and sending anonymous packets to 2 federal investigators whose names appeared nowhere near Cross's payroll history. The gala invitation had been easy. Rachel, desperate to make herself useful after betraying me, gave us access through one of Cross's event coordinators. She kept crying and saying she was sorry. I believed she was sorry. I also knew sorry had almost gotten me killed. So I left her with Nina's contact and no comfort. I wore a black dress I had bought for my anniversary dinner with Eli 3 months earlier, the dinner he canceled because he said work ran late. Standing in front of the mirror, I realized he had probably spent that night moving safe houses and checking exits while I sat alone in a restaurant pretending not to notice the pity on the waiter's face. The realization didn't soften me. It made me angrier, because even his fear had occupied space inside my marriage without permission. The Ormond Hotel glittered like it belonged in another world. Crystal lights, champagne towers, men with white teeth and women with voices polished smooth by expensive schools. A giant banner with Adrian Cross's smiling face and the words, "Building a Safer Future." I thought about the recording in the flash drive and nearly laughed. Safer. My hands steadied for the first time all day. Rage can do that. It can turn shaking into focus. Nina stayed near the ballroom entrance with an earpiece hidden under her hair. The journalist sat 3 tables away pretending to flirt with a donor. Cross moved through the room accepting praise like it was oxygen, and when I finally saw him in person, I understood something ugly. He didn't look monstrous. He looked easy. Silver at the temples, warm smile, hand on a widow's shoulder while she thanked him for some charity grant. This was how men like him survived. They didn't arrive with blood on their hands. They arrived with napkins folded like swans and cameras already pointing in their direction. Then his gaze landed on me. And he knew. I could see it in the brief hardening around his eyes before the smile returned. He crossed the room toward me with calm, measured steps. "Mara Reed," he said, as if we were old friends. "I'm sorry to hear about your husband's accident." I swallowed my disgust. "You know my husband?" "Only by reputation." He lifted a glass from a passing tray. "May I?" "Do I have a choice?" He smiled. "There's always a choice." No, I thought. That was his whole religion. Taking choices from other people and calling it business. "I heard your mother was a remarkable woman," he went on. The room seemed to tilt. "You knew my mother?" "I know many people in the justice system." "She was respected." He leaned slightly closer. "I also know grief can make us hold on to things that don't belong to us." There it was, no threat, just a polished knife, wrapped in manners. I looked him straight in the eye. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about rich men in public office. The smile didn't leave his face, but his eyes changed. "You're upset, understandably. Your husband has led a complicated life." "Complicated isn't the word I'd use." "No?" He took a slow sip. "Then perhaps you'd prefer manufactured." Men like Gabriel Hart often become whatever keeps them alive. He wanted me off balance. He wanted me doubting Gabriel more than him. The worst part was, it was working, because he wasn't entirely wrong. And then, everything nearly fell apart. My earpiece crackled. Nina's voice tight and low. "Change of plan. Cross's security found our journalist's second camera. You need to move now." Before I could react, a familiar voice came from behind me. "Step away from him, Mara." I turned. Gabriel stood at the edge of the ballroom in a dark suit, one arm still stiff from the accident, bruise visible above his collar. He wasn't hiding as Eli anymore. There was something sharper in his face. Something stripped bare. Cross actually laughed. "Well, the ghost arrives." People nearby started to notice the tension, the sudden stillness. Cameras from the stage crew angled in our direction without understanding why. Gabriel kept his eyes on me, not Cross. "I'm sorry," he said, "not theatrical, not for the room, for me." And my stupid broken heart reacted before my mind could stop it. I hated that. Cross set down his drink. "You really should have taken the deal I offered years ago." Gabriel's expression didn't move. "You mean the one where I disappear quietly and you keep buying the city one dead family at a time?" A few heads turned. Cross lowered his voice. "Careful." "No," I said suddenly. "No more careful." I pulled the flash drive from my clutch and held it up. Cross's smile vanished. That tiny change gave me more satisfaction than I can describe. "You burned homes," I said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "You paid officials. You threatened witnesses. And tonight, everybody in this room is going to know exactly who they're funding." Security started toward us. So did Nina. Cross's face went cold. "Mrs. Bennett, you are making a very serious mistake." I laughed. "Actually, it's Ms. Reed." Then I handed the drive to the Hotel AB technician standing frozen beside the stage monitor and said, "If you don't play this right now, your face will be in every article about the cover-up tomorrow. Fear works fast when it wears the right clothes." 30 seconds later, Adrian Cross's voice boomed across the ballroom. People hear building code violations and think paperwork. The whole room stopped. Cross lunged for the soundboard. Gabriel intercepted him. Security rushed in. Guests started shouting. Somebody knocked over a tray of champagne. The journalist went live from 3 different angles, and over all of it came that cold, amused recorded voice. If they can't afford better, they don't matter enough to stop the project. Gasps. Phones rising. People backing away from Cross like guilt was contagious. He shouted over the audio, "This is fabricated." Then the second file played. Payment lists. Names. Dates. Recorded instructions about the witness problem. Then a clip where he clearly referenced the apartment fire before investigators had made certain details public. That was the moment the room turned against him. Not morally, practically. Donor stepped back. A councilman walked away from the cameras. A woman from a local news station nearly ran to get closer. Cross looked at me with naked hatred then, and I finally saw the real man. No smile, no polish, just appetite. And he reached inside his jacket. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then Rachel, of all people, came out of nowhere and slammed into his arm before he could pull the gun free. The shot went into the ceiling. Screaming exploded across the ballroom. Gabriel shoved me behind him. Security tackled Cross. Rachel hit the floor hard. Nina was on top of the weapon before it stopped skidding. Everything became noise. And in the middle of it, Gabriel turned to me, breathless, eyes wild, blood soaking through the bandage at his side where the motion had ripped something open. "Mara," he said, like there was still only one person in the room. "I need you to hear this before they take statements, before lawyers, before anything else. I did come to you for the key." I stared at him, chest heaving. "I know," I said. "No." I said, "No. Listen." His voice broke. "I came for a box. I stayed because I loved the woman holding it, and every day after that, telling you the truth got harder because the lie got more expensive. Not for me, for you. I know what that makes me." I thought about all the nights he held me, all the mornings he made coffee, all the ordinary tenderness built on top of a rotten first choice. "You don't get points for finally admitting it," I said. His eyes filled anyway. "I know. And you don't get to ask me to believe that love excuses what you did. I'm not asking." "Good." He nodded once, pain all over his face, and for the first time I saw something in him I had never really been allowed to see before. Not control, not secrecy. Shame. Real helpless, late shame. Then officers pulled Cross past us in handcuffs while cameras flashed like lightning. He was shouting about smear campaigns and doctored files and enemies. Nobody looked convinced. Not anymore. Rachel was sitting on the floor crying, holding her wrist, staring at me like she didn't know whether I would spit on her or help her up. I did neither. Nina squeezed my shoulder once. "It's over." But she was wrong because public justice is one kind of ending, private truth is another. Later, after the statements, after the paramedics rebandaged Gabriel's side, after the first headlines started exploding online, I found him sitting alone in a hospital treatment room with his real name written on the chart outside. Gabriel Hart. No Bennett. No Eli. Just the man underneath. He looked exhausted. Older. Human in a way he never had before. Maybe because secrets are expensive not just to the people around them, but to the people carrying them. I stood in the doorway and didn't move closer. He gave a small, broken smile. "You don't have to come in." "I know." Silence stretched between us. Then I said, "Did you ever plan to tell me?" He stared at his hands. "So many times." "That's not what I asked." He looked up. "Not soon enough." I nodded because that, at least, was honest. He swallowed. "When your mother died, I went back to the safe deposit box and couldn't do it. I had the key number, the bank, everything. I could have taken the evidence and vanished. But by then, you were grieving. And He pressed a fist to his mouth for a second. "I couldn't become the worst thing that ever happened to you. I thought about that, about a man deciding not to steal from me while still stealing something else every day. Trust, choice, history. You already did, I said quietly. His eyes closed. I cried then finally, not because I wanted him back, and not because I was ready to forgive him, but because grief had nowhere else to go. I loved Eli, I whispered. I don't even know what to do with Gabriel. He nodded, tears slipping down his face without drama. That's fair. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Fair. As if fairness had anything to do with us. Then I stepped back from the doorway. I need a life where I never have to wonder if the beginning was real, I said. The beginning wasn't, he answered. The rest was. That line followed me for months. Adrian Cross was indicted on charges that kept growing as more people started talking. Once fear cracked, truth came pouring out. Former employees, contractors, city officials who suddenly wanted immunity more than loyalty. The recordings my mother hid became the match that lit the whole pile. Rachel testified too. I don't know if I'll ever call that redemption. Maybe survival is the more honest word. She chose badly, then chose.